Right, this story is another one from Ivy House, New Bolingbroke, from the 1970s. Now, the story you listened to, fairly recently, is about a bottle of wine that was 55 years old. Now, just before that was about 1974 or something like that. Now, just before that, I was still working for Firestone, and our head office was Lincoln. You'll have read somewhere in the podcasts about Firestone's association with Fossitt and Thorne. Well, as I mentioned in the story about the wine bottle, independent tyre retailers had to have an association with one particular manufacturer to be able to buy at sufficiently good rebates and discounts to be competitive in the marketplace. So Firestone were closely associated with Fossitt and Thorne, who had somewhere around a dozen depots up and down Lincolnshire in the early 1970s. Harry Thorne and Jim Fossitt. Harry Thorne was the salesman, the outgoing chap. Jim Fossitt was the money man, the chap who kept the brakes on things. And they'd set up this tyre retail business in the 1950s, late 1950s, around Boston. Curtin was the head office. Now, my boss, Fred Popham, was launched at Firestone Lincoln in 1955 when they opened the depot. And he managed to work on a really good relationship with Harry Thorne. And from that day, Fossitt and Thorne and Firestone were hand in glove, if you like. We were paid bonuses and things as salesmen, and as things are. And in the 1970s, I actually won 2 holidays to the Canary Islands. 1970 and 1971, we went to different islands in the Canaries, all thanks to Firestone. January, because it's cheaper in January. And Firestone bought these hotel places for the salesmen and whatever, and oodles of Firestone personnel went on these holidays, and many were getting close to the bosses as much as possible in many instances. Anyway, it's very pleasant to be able to go. Now, so Firestone were going through a lot of changes in the early 1970s when the Americans had come over and decided they knew better of how to sell stuff. They were, the best salesmen in the world, or so they thought. And so because it was an American company, I mean, it was their money, but they'd been going in England since 1936 with this big factory in Great West Road in Middlesex, and they'd just built a new factory at Wrexham. So they were well set. Well, anybody thought they were anyway. Anyway, the Americans came over and decided they wanted their ideas to be paramount in the Firestone world in Great Britain. And consequently, towards the end of 1971, we at Lincoln suddenly found ourselves under the care of a toilet roll salesman who was based at Nottingham and became our regional manager. So here we are, Firestone UK, been plodding along nicely since 1936. In the 1970s, we're doing quite well. But anyway, the Americans thought they knew better. And so they thought that a toilet roll salesman, because these people that work for household product makers and things, I won't mention any names, they are pretty aggressive salesmen. I know, because I once went for a job with one of these companies that I thought, bloody hell, I can't live like this. So I continued with Firestone. Anyway, 1971, Fred Popham, who was our district manager, was sort of demoted, and we had this chap who was a toilet roll salesman and just began throwing his weight about, and so Fred wasn't considered sufficiently senior to look after accounts like Fossitt and Thorne. Never mind the fact that he'd actually started the account and got the arrangement with Harry Thorne. We were paid bonuses and expected to increase sales figures every year, Well, this particular chap had the unfortunate ability to cut all the sales figures for that 1971 year almost by half. And this is how it happened. Not only was Fred not supposed to visit Fossitt and Thorne, but the salesman, that's me and the chap in North Lincolnshire, who worked hand in glove with Fossitt and Thorne, we became like, backup for Fossitt and Thorne, because that's where our bread and butter was. And if Fossitt and Thorne had problems with customers and they wanted some assistance with anything, then we were called on to go and help and smooth the waters or explain to customers benefits and all kinds of things. Oh, you can't do that. So salesmen were not allowed to go into Fossitt and Thorne depots at all. And there was a dozen, I think I had 7 or 8 depots in South Lincolnshire, and there were 6 or so in North Lincolnshire at that time. So you can see that the Fossitt and Thorne's turnover with Firestone in 1971 was in millions. It was in millions. And the depots held quite high stocks of Firestone products, but because we delivered twice a week, then they counted on us delivering stuff that they needed regularly. So they held quite high stocks, but it wasn't exorbitant. Right, Harry Thorne didn't like all this, and once this chap had been to see him and explained the situation, he said, "Well, yeah, all right then. I don't know why you're trying to do all this, but we don't have to buy from Firestone, I mean, I don't know what makes you think that you are wielding a big stick to us." This is this toilet roll salesman to Harry Thorne. He said, "All right, you've come in here and said you're now the contact for me with Firestone. Well, this is my instruction to you. You will send your lorries to every depot I have, and you will take away all my Firestone stock, and you will credit it to me before the end of the month." I think this is about September, October, something like 1971. So there we are. This toilet roll salesman had achieved worse than zero. He had actually got the whole stock of Firestone tyres in all these 12 or so depots throughout Lincolnshire returned for credit. So bloody hell, I don't know. This shocked everybody. We were certainly weren't going to get a bonus at this time, and there wouldn't be any foreign holidays in 1972, I can see. So not for us anyway. So this caused great ructions throughout Firestone and Lincolnshire and whatever. And in fact, the toilet roll salesman was dispensed with quite quickly. At least somebody saw the light. And Fred was reinstated quite quickly. And the salesman again, well, they were Fred's salesman, so he was left to do what he wanted with his salesman. It was just 2 of us, but it was a good team. Firestone Lincoln, unbeatable. Probably one of the best Firestone district offices in the whole of the UK. I must slip a little bit in here that I think I actually had forgotten when I was doing this story. But in fact, September, October, when Harry Thorne told this particular gentleman to take all his stock back, but there's another thing that I must mention, it's equally seriously. He didn't buy another Firestone tyre until January of the next year. So for 3 months, he didn't buy one Firestone tyre, just to show them that in fact he didn't have to buy Firestone products at all. I mean, Firestone were good products, and they were number 2 in the UK at that time. They were ahead of everybody else except for Michelin. Michelin were the most superior product, still are. Michelin are, the very best, but expensive. But they are the best, and that's it. So Firestone were number 2 though, and they lost it all. Got the tyres back. I don't think they ever stocked quite as many since from that date on. They relied on stuff being delivered regularly, but they were still our biggest customer. I think it could have been, I won't tell you the chap's name because he might be embarrassed. He won't be alive now. He was a lot older than me then, and I'm ancient now. So it must have been between £500,000 and £1 million, the value of the stock returned for credit Can you imagine a company having to write out a cheque for credit for £500,000? And all this has brought about by their new general manager in a certain area of the United Kingdom. He didn't stay there very long. So horses for courses, I would say. And just because someone's successful selling toilet rolls doesn't mean that they can be successful selling tyres in Lincolnshire. Oh, that was very well. It wasn't amusing at the time, but it's amusing if you think about it now. I think that's about all for this little story. If you want to read more about this, there's podcasts about Firestone and Fossitt and Thorne and Firestone and things like that. They're quite interesting stories in and among there. The years I enjoyed immensely working for Firestone at that time, because it was still, things were pretty good and we were quite well paid for the job, and it was enjoyable and pleasant. Of course, 1970s weren't they? Well, those of you that can remember living in the 1970s, of course they were. Anyway, thanks for being with us today for that little short story. I just wanted to get that out of my system because I wrote it down. I thought, oh yeah, I must tell them about the toilet roll salesman. There we are. Don't forget, Cracker Books. Have a look at what we do. There's podcasts to download on any device you like and listen to these stories. There's all these picture books and books for children and complete story books. You can download them free of charge. And then there's all these YouTube videos. Thanks for being with us, and until the next time, cheerio.